If today felt like one of those days, the kind that weighs on your shoulders and lingers in your thoughts, if the world outside still echoes in your chest, know this: you're safe now. You can release it all. There's nothing to solve tonight, nothing urgent, just this moment, just rest. If what you crave right now is simply a pause to breathe, to soften, to drift off without effort, then stay here with me. And if this quiet space brings you peace, I'd be so grateful if you helped it grow. Like the video, subscribe for more nights like this, and share it with someone who could use a little more sleep in their life. Thank you for being here. Now, let's surrender to stillness together. Lie back gently. If you can, rest on your back. Let your arms relax by your sides, palms open to the air. Slowly, without hurry, close your eyes. Feel the mattress beneath you, like it's whispering. You don't have to carry anything now. Let's breathe together. Inhale through your nose, cool, soft air filling your lungs. Pause just for a second, and then exhale through your mouth, like a sigh that lets the whole day fall away. Let's do it again, twice more. Breathe in, slowly, gently. Hold, breathe out, melting further into your bed. One last time, inhale, hold, exhale, like your body is slowly dissolving into the night around you. Now, bring your awareness down to your feet. Feel them warm, grounded, calm. Let that sense of softness rise. Your legs quiet, your hips and lower back at ease, your belly, your chest unburdened, your arms, hands open, weightless. Your jaw, your face, everything softens, everything knows you can rest now. And if sleep begins to come, let it arrive like a gentle tide. But if you're still here, just a little longer, then close your eyes just a bit more. And let's begin tonight's story. Tonight, we begin a soft, sand-swept stroll through the childhood of one of history's most overachieving teenagers, Alexander the Great. But don't worry tonight, he's not conquering anything. He's just a dusty, daydreaming kid in ancient Macedon, surrounded by scrolls, sandal straps, and stories way too epic for someone still learning to tie his own tunic. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love knowing where in the world you're dozing off. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a child in the city of Pella, the capital of Macedon. It smells like olive oil, old books, and ambition. Your mother, Olympias, says you're descended from heroes. Your father, King Philip II, says you'll be one. And in the meantime, you're learning to wrestle barefoot on gravel, memorize Homeric verse before breakfast, and practice your swordplay against fig trees that never stood a chance. The palace is busy, but not overwhelming. There are courtyards with mosaics, columns that hum with cicadas in summer, and hallways that echo with the click of leather sandals and the occasional burst of debate over whether Sparta is still relevant. Your earliest memory might be the feel of a wooden sword in your palm. It's too big for your hand, but you refuse to let anyone help. You slash the air like a future champion, almost decapitating a servant who only wanted to refill your water jug. He survives. You learn to aim at night. You lie on a cushion stuffed with straw, staring at the ceiling beams. Olympias tells you stories of Achilles, your supposed ancestor. She insists Your bloodline is divine descended from gods and demigods, filtered through oracles, and possibly enhanced by snake magic. Yes, there are snakes. She keeps a few as pets. You don't ask why. Your father, meanwhile, is out conquering tribes and turning Macedon into something more than a collection of squabbling nobles and suspicious goats. He sends back reports that read like adventure novels, battles won, alliances made, weddings staged like hostage negotiations. When he returns, it's always dramatic, horses galloping, shields clanging. You pretend not to care, but you do. Once, he lifts you onto his warhorse and says, "One day, the world will need to make room for your feet." You believe him. Why wouldn't you? Most days, though, are simpler. You study with private tutors who smell like ink and pepper and argue whether the earth is flat or just slightly exhausted. You read epics, learn about geometry, though not enthusiastically, and are told repeatedly that the Persians are the gold-plated villains of every good story outside of lessons. You play war games with other noble children. You always insist on being the commander, because of course you do. Sometimes you win. When you don't, you rewrite the rules. You begin keeping a small notebook, papyrus pages with uneven edges, where you draw maps of places you've never been. Egypt, Persia, the edge of the world. You doodle little stick figures with spears and crowns, and name them after yourself. One day, you watch a storm roll in across the fields. It's slow, theatrical, like it knows it has an audience. The lightning forks over the hills and makes you think of Zeus. You tell yourself the gods are probably watching, that they have plans for you. They might even be impressed. Historians still debate whether you believed the myths or simply used them as motivation. Were you truly convinced you were destined for greatness, or did you just find it convenient? The consensus is probably both. You train with older boys and adult soldiers. They don't go easy on you. Bruises bloom like lazy grapes across your arms. You don't complain. You study their moves. You get faster. You stop losing. You also develop the ability to talk to anyone. Stable boys, generals, visiting poets. You listen more than you speak. But when you do speak, people listen. It's a talent that will grow teeth later. For now, it's just something that makes adults raise their eyebrows and say things like, "Well, he's different." Your dog follows you everywhere. Your first armor is decorative and mostly symbolic. You name your toy shield Achilles Jr. and challenge kitchen staff to duels. And through it all, there's this quiet sense of waiting. Like the world isn't quite ready. Like it needs you to grow up a little more before it can really begin turning in the way it's supposed to. So, you grow, you stretch, you read, you spar. You learn to say the right things to the right people. You learn which herbs cure cuts, and which ones just make you smell like disappointment. You don't know it yet, but you're not just training for war. You're learning to be a myth in real time. A story walking on 2 feet, still small, still sticky with honey, but already casting a shadow longer than your age allows. And one night, not too far from now, a man will arrive at the palace, bearded, brilliant, and carrying scrolls like weapons. His name will be Aristotle, and your world will expand faster than your sandals can keep up. But that's a story for the next whisper. You're 13 years old, and someone has just decided that now is the right time for you to learn about ethics, metaphysics, and how the digestive system of a goat somehow reflects the order of the cosmos, that someone is your father, King Philip, who hires the best philosopher, money, power, and a half-implied threat of exile can acquire, Aristotle of Stagira. He arrives in a carriage full of scrolls and the kind of beard that tells you this man has opinions. You meet him under the soft sway of olive trees in Mysa, a quiet corner of Macedon set aside for royal education and philosophical expansion. There's a slight breeze, a strong scent of thyme in the air, and a suspicious amount of ants underfoot. Welcome to school. Your classmates are other young noble sons of generals, diplomats, and one boy who insists on drawing spears in the margins of every papyrus. They fidget. You sit still. You already sense this might be important. Aristotle doesn't smile much. He wears a robe that's too warm for the weather, gestures with long fingers, and starts his first lesson with a question. What makes a life worth living? You answer, winning battles. He sighs. From that day on, you begin a journey that's equal parts enlightening and confusing. You study logic, syllogisms, the golden mean, natural philosophy, ethics, biology, meteorology, astronomy, and for some reason, the migration habits of sea urchins. Aristotle believes that knowing how everything works, especially the unglamorous stuff, is essential to ruling wisely. You walk through shaded groves, trailing behind him, occasionally stopping so he can point at a plant and explain why its root structure is a metaphor for the soul. You nod. Sometimes you understand. Sometimes you just pretend. He appreciates the effort. He teaches you moderation, that every virtue is a balance between two extremes. Courage lies between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity between stinginess and extravagance. You ask where ambition falls. He says, between laziness and tyranny. You raise an eyebrow. He pretends not to notice. There's a rhythm to your lessons. Mornings are for theory. Afternoons are for walking discussions. Evenings are for copying things down and pretending you didn't doze off halfway through a treatise on animal reproduction. You learn to ask better questions. Aristotle says that's the true mark of intelligence, not answers, but questions that open doors. You discover the parts of the soul, the rational, the spirited, the appetitive. You try to figure out which part makes you want to own a bigger sword. He teaches you about city-states, constitutions, and the dangers of flattery. You make a mental note to test this later by asking your generals if they'd still follow you if you grew a terrible mustache. You never do grow it, but it becomes a running joke. You read Homer again, but this time with commentary. Aristotle dissects Achilles' motivations like he's writing a psychological report. You begin to see the old stories differently, less as fairy tales, more as case studies. You wonder, is this what thinking deeply feels like? It's a bit like chewing something you can't swallow, but also can't spit out. Occasionally, you push back. What if someone wants to be great and virtuous, but also terrifying? Aristotle pauses, says, then you must be careful not to confuse power with goodness. You chew on that one for a week. You also learn to categorize plants, animals, emotions. You're shown how to observe the world, not just as a stage for your destiny, but as a living library. Everything means something. Every motion, every silence, Even the way a tortoise retracts into its shell has implications. One day, a tutor brings a wounded bird into the study. Aristotle uses it to explain anatomy. You ask if it will live. He says no, but it's still useful. You don't forget that moment. There's some math to ratios, geometry. You tolerate it, barely. You start to write, not just notes, reflections, short essays, philosophical questions, disguised as battle plans. Your penmanship improves. Your metaphors get sharper. You write about the sea, about kingship, about whether anyone can ever truly know themselves. You write about courage and why it sometimes feels lonely. You begin to admire Aristotle, not in the way you admire warriors or poets, but in the quiet way you admire something inevitable, like sunrise. He's not exciting, but he's thorough. You trust his brain even when it annoys yours. Historians still argue how much he influenced you. Some say profoundly. His ideas echo in your strategies, your politics, your vision of a unified empire. Others argue you absorbed what was useful and ignored the rest. Maybe both are true. You wouldn't be the first student to pretend to love Plato when really just enjoying the metaphors. Still, something sticks. A voice in the back of your mind that says, balance, purpose, observe. Even when you're sharpening your spear, you now wonder whether that action has an ethical dimension. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you just like the way it sounds. At the end of each lesson, Aristotle sends you off with a question. You often lie awake with it. The night air in Mysa is filled with crickets, distant owls, and the slow creak of tree limbs under the weight of their own fruit. You think about justice, about empire, about whether knowledge is power or just the burden before it. You're still a teenager, but the way you look at the world is changing, and one day soon you'll look not just at the world, but across it and decide it's too small. You're 16, which in ancient Macedon means you're expected to lead troops into battle, manage a province, and still remember to bow properly at banquets. Most kids your age are worrying about acne. You're commanding soldiers. Your father is off campaigning in Illyrio, probably scowling at a hill or intimidating someone into surrender. In his absence, he leaves you in charge of the kingdom. It's a ceremonial title, mostly a nod to your status as heir, a chance to look important while the adults do the actual work. Except then, a real threat appears. A Thracian rebellion flares up north of Macedon. These aren't your friendly neighborhood philosophers. They're mountain people with axes and complicated hairstyles. And suddenly, your regency is no longer about hosting dignitaries and reciting noble lineages. It's about war. You're offered advisors, older generals, to take charge while you observe. You say, thank you, and ignore all of them. You ride out with your own troops, your own banner, and the quiet voice of Aristotle somewhere in your head asking, is this virtuous courage or performative recklessness? The countryside smells like pine, sweat, and potential. Your armor isn't even fully broken in yet. Your sandals are too clean, but you've trained for this. You've studied formations, memorized terrain maps, practiced giving orders in a tone that doesn't crack. Your army isn't huge, a few thousand hoplites, some cavalry, and enough archers to annoy from a distance. You camp at night under stars that look a little too cheerful for what's coming. Your men eye you sideways, Some are veterans, twice your age, already planning which way they'll run when things go wrong. But they underestimate your gift. You pay attention. When the Thracians appear at dawn, shouting, clanging, brandishing curved blades, you don't panic. You notice the slope of the land, the gap in their left flank, the way their commander is wearing a very identifiable red cape and standing far too close to the front line. You order a feint, then a flank maneuver. Your cavalry swings wide, your archers hold until the last second, and your infantry holds a formation so tight it might as well be furniture. The enemy breaks. You don't. When the dust settles, you're still on your horse, breathing hard, eyes wide but steady. The red-caped commander is gone. Your troops are bloodied, panting, but victorious, and the veterans, they stop calling you, boy, behind your back. After the battle, you walk among the wounded. You speak to them, not in the dramatic, scroll-worthy wage. As a leader who knows names that detail more than the tactics earns their loyalty, you send word to your father. The report is modest, mostly facts, few adjectives. Still, when he reads it, Philip purportedly says, "This child will outdo me." A high compliment, possibly said through gritted teeth. You're still a teenager, but now you're a teenager who's won a real battle. And once you've felt that, once you've seen soldiers cheer your name, felt the tremble of earth under your own charge, you can't go back to olive trees and syllogisms. Back at court, you don't brag, you don't need to. People talk, nobles look at you differently. Some with admiration, others with concern. After all, you're proving yourself a little too quickly. You start noticing who smiles too wide, who avoids your gaze, who starts sending extra wine at feasts, hoping to soften your judgment. You learn politics the hard way, through banquet conversations and the subtle art of not blinking first. You train harder, read less, write more. But now it's campaign plans instead of reflections on virtue. You keep a small group of trusted companions, Hephestion among them, your closest friend, maybe more. The world outside court grows louder, and you start craving it. Battle gives you something no tutor can: clarity. On the field, everything either works or it doesn't. People either follow you or they don't. It's brutal, yes, but honest. Historians still wonder how much credit you really deserve for those early victories. Some say experienced commanders made the real decisions. Others argue that you showed tactical B. It's a sunny day in Ija. Birds are chirping, sandals are squeaking, and your father is about to be murdered in front of half the Macedonian elite. You're 20 years old, standing in a crowd of nobles and warriors, watching your father, King Philip II, march triumphantly into the theater for his latest wedding celebration. This one's to Cleopatra Eurydice, a Macedonian noblewoman not to be confused with Cleopatra of Egypt, who hasn't been born yet, and who will eventually have enough drama of her own to warrant several operas. Philip walks in, flanked by guards, nodding with royal smugness. The crowd cheers. You're there, possibly smiling, possibly calculating neither way, not expecting what happens next. Out of nowhere, a man named Pausanias, a bodyguard, of all people, rushes forward and stabs your father. One thrust, just one. No long speech, no foreshadowing. Philip collapses. Chaos erupts. Within seconds, Pausanias is dead, tackled by other guards. No trial, no interrogation. just a sudden royal silence. Welcome to the throne. The kingdom is now yours, sort of. There's no applause, no slow-motion coronation scene. Just a room full of generals and advisors blinking slowly, as if trying to remember where they last put their loyalty. Some look at you with skepticism, others with thinly disguised ambition. A few are clearly calculating whether your sudden ascension is a temporary inconvenience or a long-term problem. You're crowned king almost immediately. There's protocol, of course, but it moves fast when no one wants to give rivals time to rally. The crown feels heavy, not symbolically, literally. It's made of gold and expectation, and it pinches behind the ears. You don't get to grieve. There's no time. Your mother, Olympias, reacts by allegedly murdering Cleopatra, Eurydice, and her child. It's never confirmed, but the royal nursery goes very, very quiet. You look the other way. Maybe you even thank her, silently. The court becomes a theater of whispers. Everyone is polite. Everyone is plotting. Your job now is to look calm, sound brilliant, and act like you expected all of this. So you do. You give speeches. You visit temples. You reappoint old advisors and replace a few two-jests, enough to keep people guessing. You issue decrees. Most are practical. Some are just to see who blinks. You tour the provinces, receive tribute, and meet with tribal leaders who bow a little too stiffly. Your soldiers are watching. The older ones remember Philip. They still say his name with weight. You don't try to replace him. You do one better. You start making them say yours. You're not just a king now. You're the continuation of something bigger. The culmination of Philip's reforms, dreams, and carefully sharpened diplomacy. You don't reject that legacy. You sharpen it. You order new military drills. You revise taxes. You reinforce alliances. And because you're you, you also start whispering about your future campaign against Persia. Everyone pretends not to hear you, not because they doubt you, but because the idea is so large it might crush the furniture. Then there's Greece. The city-states, Athens, Thebes. Others hear about Philip's death and assume Macedon is weak. They start making noises about independence, freedom, democracy. You respond by marching your army south with casual urgency and surrounding Thebes like it's your afternoon hobby. Thebes folds. Athens panics. The rest get very quiet. You call a meeting of the League of Corinth. All the major Greek powers show up. You don't threaten them. You inspire them. Or at least you talk long enough that they feel inspired to agree. You propose unity, a coalition, a grand campaign against the Persian Empire. You say it's for revenge, for glory, for Greece. They nod, slowly, reluctantly, but they nod. Historians still debate whether you were a peacemaker or a manipulator, whether your diplomacy was sincere or just war dressed in a tunic. The answer, of course, is yes. By the end of the year, the throne is secure, the army is loyal, Greece is quiet, and your gaze shifts east. At night, you lie in your chamber, staring at the ceiling. You think of Philip, of Aristotle, of Achilles, of maps without edges. The empire you inherited feels like a preface. What comes next is the real story. You rise early, speak softly, and plan loudly. Your generals begin to follow, not just out of duty, but out of belief. You are Alexander III of Macedon now, and the world hasn't even started resisting you yet. Before you conquer Persia, unite Greece and start casually redrawing the borders of the known world. You need to deal with something far more immediate, a horse with a dramatic streak and a serious dislike for humans. His name is Bucephalus. He's tall, black, muscular, and looks like he could trample a fortress for breakfast. His eyes glint with suspicion. His hooves are like thunder in horse form, and he's completely, categorically unrideable. You're 12 when you first meet him. You're standing in a dusty training yard, watching your father, Philip, argue with a horse trader who's trying to sell this four-legged tempest for a sum that could fund a small war. The horse has already bucked off several stable hands, chased one unfortunate groom into a hedge, and generally made it clear that he has zero interest in becoming anyone's noble steed. Your father scoffs, says the horse is wild, dangerous, a waste of money. The trader insists Bucephalus just needs the right rider. Your father counters with an offer half the asking price. The horse throws a saddle into the air for emphasis. You watch, quietly, thoughtfully. Then you step forward and say, "I can ride him." Everyone laughs, the kind of laughter adults do when they're nervous and hoping to avoid lawsuits. Philip raises an eyebrow. "If you can ride him," he says, "he's yours." The laughter fades. You walk slowly toward Bucephalus. He snorts, stomps, glares. You stop a few feet away and just watch. You notice how he flinches when his shadow falls across the ground, how his ears twitch toward every movement, how he turns his head to avoid the sun. And you get it. He's not afraid of people. He's afraid of shadows, his own. So, without saying a word, you lead him gently toward the sun. His shadow disappears beneath him. He calms, not completely, but enough. You mount him slowly, one hand on the reins, the other on his thick neck. He stiffens, but doesn't bolt. You lean forward and whisper something, maybe nonsense, maybe poetry, and then he moves. You ride across the training yard, then farther across the field. The wind hits your face, the world blurs, and Bucephalus, that living tempest, runs like he's finally remembered what freedom feels like. You return in silence. Philip is stunned. For a moment, he just stares at you. Then he says something that echoes in your skull for years. "My son, seek out a kingdom worthy of your greatness. Macedon is too small for you. Bucephalus becomes yours, more than a mount, a partner, a symbol. He follows you into every campaign, every battle, every awkward diplomatic banquet where someone brings out a goat as a gift. He won't let anyone else ride him. Occasionally, he lets Hephaestion feed him apples. That's it. You train together daily, galloping at dawn, swimming rivers, climbing hills that look more like cliffs. You learn each other's signals. When he twitches his ear, you know a threat is near. When you shift your weight, he adjusts like you're thinking with the same spine. He hates unnecessary noise. He hates certain musicians. He has a weird habit of biting people who wear too much perfume. Over time, the men start calling him a warhorse, but he's not. Not really. He's a reflection of your will, your defiance, your refusal to accept that something cannot be tamed, just because it hasn't yet been understood. When you go east, he goes with you, into the battles that define your legend. Issus, Gaugamela, the walls of Tyre, always ahead, always unflinching. Historians argue about the Bucephalus story. Some think it's myth-making, a legend crafted to show your natural genius. Others think it really happened, that you, even at 12, saw what grown men missed. Either way, the image sticks. The boy who saw a horse's fear and turned it into a bond. Years later, when Bucephalus dies after carrying you across more terrain than most people ever see, is buried with full honors, you name a city after him, Bucephala, because of course you do. You've named cities after rivers, winds, dreams, not a horse. At night, as you sit in your tent with scrolls and maps and the weight of the empire pressing behind your eyes, you sometimes hear him outside, snorting softly, pacing, waiting. And for a moment, you remember the boy who could see shadows and thought, maybe that's not the end of the story. You've got a kingdom, you've got a horse, you've got a crown that pinches, and a head full of Aristotle's greatest hits. Now all you need is an army big enough to make your neighbors nervous, and a coalition of Greek city-states that actually agrees on something besides their mutual love of olives. So, naturally, you decide to unite Greece. Let's be honest, it's a bit of a stretch to call it unity. It's more like highly organized compliance. The Greek city-states never been famous for getting along. Athens likes democracy. Sparta likes discipline. Thebes likes thieves. And most of them still remember that time your father, Philip, turned their internal squabbles into Macedonian dominance with the subtlety of a battering ram. Still, you're diplomatic at first. You send envoys. You offer polite speeches. You mention things like common ancestry and shared destiny, and those rude Persians who burned our temples that one time. You host meetings, propose alliances, and use the word cooperation at least twice per paragraph. Some city-states nod, others glare. Thebes, in particular, is not feeling cooperative. They mistake your youth for softness, a common error. So you march south. It's a short campaign, brisk as a morning jog. You surround Thebes with frightening efficiency. You offer them a chance to surrender. They decline, citing something about pride and heritage, and probably some ancient bylaws. So, you destroy the city. Not gently, not symbolically. You reduce it. Buildings fall, walls collapse. Thebes becomes a cautionary tale. You spare the temples because, even in conquest, you respect good architecture, but the message is clear. Disunity will be met with decisive urban remodeling. The Greek world goes quiet. Athens, usually the loudest at any symposium, suddenly finds its polite voice. Sparta, which never officially joined the alliance, continues doing push-ups in silence. The other city-states shuffle into line like students who just realized the substitute teacher has a sword. You convene the League of Corinth. It sounds noble, a grand council of Greek powers working together in harmony. In practice, it's a Macedonian-led military pact with better branding. You are unanimously elected as its leader. You try not to smirk during the vote. At the first session, you lay out your vision, not just for Greece, for the world. You speak of crossing into Asia, of avenging past wrongs, of bringing order to chaos. You quote Homer. You invoke the gods. You even throw in a reference to divine favor just for spice. Your audience, still slightly shaken by the absence of Thebes on the map, agrees. Historians debate whether your dream of unity was sincere or strategic. Did you really believe in a unified Hellenic identity? Or did you just want everyone pointed in the same direction so they'd stop stabbing each other long enough to stab someone else? Again, the answer is yes. You spend the winter reorganizing, training troops, updating supplies, standardizing weaponry. You have Macedonian infantry, Thessalian cavalry, archers from Crete, engineers from Athens. It's not just an army. It's a mobile mosaic. You hold war games that are part drill, part theater. You inspect armor. You memorize names. You host dinners where you listen more than you speak, and leave everyone wondering if you're charismatic or just terrifyingly competent. You also give speeches, lots of them. You're good at it. You understand rhythm, pause, the art of metaphor. You know how to say things that make grown men stare into the distance and imagine themselves as part of something eternal. You don't just talk about victory, you talk about legacy. At night, in your quarters, you study maps. Asia lies ahead, vast, golden, filled with cities and stories. You dream not of loot or revenge, but of connection, a world not separated by mountains and rivers, but drawn together by roads, ideas, and maybe a few strategically placed garrisons. You keep a list of cities you want to visit: Babylon, Persepolis, Susa. You wonder what their streets smell like. You also wonder if unity can be real. If all these people, Greeks, Macedonians, Persians, everyone in between, can actually function together. Or if peace is just what happens between wars. Still, you prepare, you build, you inspire, and when the spring arrives, you ride out not just as a king, but as a leader of nations. The League of Corinth rides behind you, quietly, respectfully, hopefully not planning anything. And in your saddlebag, just behind the rations and the backup cloak, is a scroll with Aristotle's handwriting and a single underlined phrase: to rule justly is harder than to conquer quickly. You plan to try both. You've unified Greece mostly through charisma, a touch of symbolism, and the sudden disappearance of Thebes. Now you stand on the edge of Europe, staring across the Hellespont toward Asia. The wind off the sea is brisk, the sun is theatrical, and everything feels like it's been perfectly staged for Act 1 of a myth. This isn't just a military crossing, it's a performance, and you, naturally, are the lead. The Hellespont, now called the Dardanelles, is narrow enough to see the opposite shore, but wide enough to make history feel big. The Persians once crossed here, arrogantly, with bridges made of boats. They paid for it. Now you, Alexander of Macedon, stand ready to cross in the opposite direction, ideally, with fewer sandals lost to the tide. The ceremony is deliberate. Before boarding your flagship, you perform a sacrifice to Poseidon, god of the sea, and to Athena, because it's always wise to hedge your divine bets. The smoke rises in lazy spirals as your priests chant, and somewhere nearby, your soldiers fidget with their gear and try not to look seasick preemptively. Then comes the moment everyone will write about. You step forward, you take a spear, you hurl it into the water. It arcs, glittering, then splashes down near the bow of your ship. I claim Asia as mine, you say. The wind catches your cloak dramatically. A seagull cries in approval. Your generals exchange glances that say, "Did he practice that?" He did, obviously. You sail across the water with your army of 40,000 troops and a vision that could barely fit in your war chest. The sea is calm, The oars dip in rhythm. The ships follow in neat lines. Your commanders try to pretend this is routine, but everyone feels it. This is the beginning of something strange and enormous. You land near Troy. Yes, that Troy, the city of Homeric legend. Achilles, Hector, wooden horses, and all that poetic trauma. You pay homage at the supposed tomb of Achilles. You run a race around it barefoot, because that's what the legends say he did. You offer gifts. You whisper things to the winds. Your men whisper things too, like, "Is this all necessary?" You ignore them. You declare yourself a new Achilles. The comparison is not subtle, but then again, you didn't come this far to be subtle. From there, the campaign begins in earnest. You march inland through Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, where the roads are bad, the towns are wary, and the locals speak in accents that make your translators shrug. You find welcome in some places, resistance in others. You move quickly, efficiently, always ahead of schedule. Your army gets used to the pace, which is to say, they complain a lot, but follow anyway. You win your first major battle at the Granicus River. It's messy, wet, and involves a lot of yelling on horseback. At one point, you almost diced by a sharp-eyed officer who blocks a sword aimed at your face. You thank him later with a promotion and a nod that says, "Good reflexes." Your strategy is simple. Strike hard, move fast, offer terms only after the banners fall. It works. Persian satraps begin fleeing. Local cities start opening their gates. Your legend grows faster than your calluses. In Sardis, you're greeted as a liberator. In Halicarnassus, you lay siege with all the enthusiasm of a man assembling IKEA furniture, determined, confused, and mildly vengeful. You send letters home. Some are updates. Others are thinly veiled bragging. "Dear Greece, Asia is lovely. The roads need work. I'm winning." Historians debate whether your ceremonial crossing of the Hellespont was necessary. Some say it was propaganda. Others say it was spiritual. You say nothing because you're already halfway to the next city. The campaign has begun. You are not yet great, officially, but you are definitely capitally ambitious. And somewhere deep down, you suspect this isn't just a war. It's a rewrite, a chance to take the myths and make them walk again in your own sandals, no less. The Hellespont is behind you. The world is in front of you. And your spear, somewhere out in the sea, is probably still sinking slowly toward the bottom, claiming countenance with quiet determination. You arrive in Egypt not as a conqueror, but as something far more useful, a liberator. The Persians, who've held Egypt for over a century, aren't exactly beloved here. Their tax policies are confusing, their gods unfamiliar, and their architecture severely lacking in sphinxes. So when your army crosses into Egypt, it isn't met with swords. It's met with songs, garlands, and possibly the warmest welcome a heavily armed foreign army has ever received. The Nile greets you with lazy curves and golden banks. The temples shimmer in the sun like stone prayers. The people bow with a mix of respect and resignation. They've had a lot of pharaohs. One more doesn't shake the schedule. Still, you don't just walk in and demand crowns. You study the local customs. You learn the proper rituals. You don't try to replace their gods, you add them to your growing divine LinkedIn profile. Ra, Osiris, Amen. You light incense. You bow. You nod thoughtfully at hieroglyphs. You visit priests who speak in riddles and smell like date syrup. Somewhere along the line, they call you son of Amen. You pretend to be surprised. Then comes the journey to Siwa. It's a remote oasis in the Libyan desert, home to the oracle of Amen, one of the most respected and sandiest oracles in the ancient world. The trip is long, hot, and entirely unnecessary unless you're looking to have your identity questioned by a man in a feathered hat who talks to statues. Naturally, you go. You don't take your whole army, just a trusted retinue and a lot of water skins. The desert stretches out like a beige eternity. You ride. By day, sleep under the stars and listen to the wind mutter things you don't want to translate. At last, you reach the oasis. Palm trees sway, birds chirp. The oracle's temple rises like a mirage that decided to stick around. The priests greet you in soft tones. You enter alone. What happens inside? No one knows. You emerge hours later, expression unreadable. When your generals ask what the oracle said, you reply, "He said what I needed to hear." Classic. Rumors spread. Some say the oracle called you divine. Some say it confirmed you as son of Amen, essentially declaring you a god in local terms. Others claim it was all an elaborate PR move involving strategic lighting and suggestive incense. Historians still argue about it. You never clarify. What matters is what comes next. You return to Memphis, Egypt's capital, at the time not with a new army, but with new aura. You are crowned pharaoh in a traditional Egyptian ceremony. You wear the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. You sit in golden chairs. You pose for statues that make you look 30% taller and 100% divine. Then you do what you do best. You found a city. Not just any city, Alexandria. The Alexandria, the one that will eventually house the Great Library. A massive lighthouse, and approximately 17 debates per day about the importance of archiving papyrus scrolls alphabetically. You choose the site yourself. On the Mediterranean coast, flat land, good harbor, solid view. You draw the city layout in flour on the sand. Birds try to eat it. You try to look unfazed. The city is designed with straight streets, wide plazas, and temples to both Greek and Egyptian gods. It's a blend of worlds. Like you, as your army rests, you spend time studying the stars, not just for navigation, but for signs. Your conversations drift from tactics to metaphysics. You begin speaking more slowly. Your letters get more poetic. Your orders more symbolic. You start thinking not just like a king, but like someone meant to reshape civilization. Your soldiers raise eyebrows. Your officers whisper, "Is this a phase, a heat stroke, or something else?" You still train, still ride Bucephalus, still give rousing speeches about honor and salt rations. But there's something new in your voice, a kind of calm certainty. You believe you're on a mission, not just conquest, transformation, to unify East and West, to bring Greek rationality and Persian elegance into dialogue, to build cities where philosophers can argue next to merchants and nobody gets stabbed. Your time in Egypt changes you. It gives you space, perspective, sand. You leave not just as a general with momentum, but as a figure wrapped in myth, a god king, a man with 2 crowns, 3 titles, and an increasingly complex relationship with humility. And as your ships prepare to sail east again, your men gather on the banks of the Nile. They watch the sun dip behind your latest city. They murmur about destiny. You smile faintly, because the next chapter is Persia, and Persia has been waiting. Persepolis doesn't fall, it sighs. You arrive in the spring, when the air is thick with pollen and the scent of crushed lilies under cavalry hooves. The Persian Empire has already been trembling for some time. After Isis, after Gaugamela, after Babylon opened its gates like a nervous hostess, this moment feels inevitable. But still Persepolis, it's not just a city, it's a statement, built by Darius I, refined by Xerxes, adorned with the labor of entire generations. Its terraces are grand, its columns, so many columns, stretch skyward, like a forest made of ambition. Reliefs decorate the walls, carved with subjects bringing tribute, gold, horses, spices, polite faces. You march in not like a conqueror, but like someone fulfilling prophecy. The city doesn't resist. The satrap flees. The guards melt into the hills. The doors open. You walk the streets on Bucephalus, your men close behind, their armor clinking like uncertain applause. Your army is respectful at first. They loot but neatly. No massacres, no fires, just a calculated unpacking of centuries of imperial opulence. You make your camp near the palace complex. You wander the halls once occupied by kings who saw themselves as gods. You sit on a throne so tall your feet don't touch the floor. You study the inscriptions. You touch the stone, still warm from the sun, and you start to feel it, the enormity of what you've done. You've conquered the Achaemenid Empire. The Persians, who once marched into Greece, who burned Athens, who terrified your ancestors, are now under your sandal. So naturally, you throw a party, not just any party, a symposium, an epic night of wine, music, debate, and questionable decisions. Your closest friends attend. Musicians pluck lutes, philosophers recite Homer, dancers swirl like fig-scented breezes, and then someone, possibly you, possibly a very persuasive companion, suggests that burning Persepolis would be a fitting revenge, a symbolic act, one great purge to balance the books of history. You hesitate just a little, then you nod. Torches are lit, curtains catch, flames rise. The palace, once the jewel of an empire, becomes an enormous bonfire. At first, everyone cheers. It's dramatic, it's cathartic. It makes for excellent storytelling. But as the fire spreads, a hush falls, stone blackens, columns crack, the sky glows orange. The reliefs of tribute bearers flicker and vanish. The wind carries embers like angry snowflakes. You stand on a nearby hill and watch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Hours pass. The fire dies eventually, leaving only smoke, ash, and the kind of silence that doesn't end with sunrise. You return to your tent. You don't speak. In the morning, you walk the ruins. Your sandals crunch over charcoal. Statues lie in fragments. You run your hand along a scorched wall and wonder what it meant, what it means. Historians will later say you regretted it, that it was a drunken impulse, a moment of rage, dressed up as vengeance. Others will argue it was strategic, a way to sever ties with the old order, to prevent the Persians from imagining a restored court. Some believe it marked the beginning of your transformation, that from this point on, you no longer fought to conquer, but to build. You never explain, but after Persepolis, your behavior shifts. You start dressing more like a Persian king. You adopt their customs. You keep their advisors. You walk through markets without a helmet, learning names, listening to merchants. You start speaking of unity, not just of conquest. You hold ceremonies where Greek and Persian officers eat together. You talk about merging traditions, not erasing them. Your men don't love this. They mutter about assimilation, about softness, about the smell of foreign incense. You don't care. You've seen what fire does. You've felt its heat. And now, with the Achaemenid capital in ruins, you realize something strange. You've run out of enemies. Darius III, the Persian king, is still alive for now, but he's in retreat, more rumor than ruler. You've taken his capitals, claimed his treasuries, sat on his throne, burned his house. What's left, you don't know yet, but you begin to dream of India. And in those dreams, the fires of Persepolis flicker behind your eyes like a warning, or maybe just a memory of when power stopped being about victory and started being about legacy. You've burned the capital. You've claimed the empire. You've sat on thrones that were never designed for Greek sandals. So now, naturally, you decide it's time for a wedding. But not just one wedding, 72 of them, because you're Alexander, and when you commit to a symbolic gesture, you don't do it halfway. You've spent the last year transforming from conqueror to king, not just in title, but in style. You wear Persian robes. You greet officials with gestures that make your Macedonian generals roll their eyes. You sit under golden canopies and talk about unity while sipping wine from imported cups. Some think you're going soft. You think you're building something. You understand that conquest is only the beginning. To rule an empire, you must stitch it together with more than roads and garrisons. You need stories. You need families. You need weddings. So you organize one. In Susa, a grand Persian city, still reeling from your presence, you erect pavilions. You summon tailors, jewelers, musicians, cooks. You send invitations that are more like orders. And you pick out 72 noble Persian women daughters of satraps, generals, advisors. Pair them with your top commanders, including yourself. You choose Statera, daughter of Darius III, the man you chased across mountains and deserts. It's not personal, it's political. It always is. You marry her with ceremony and solemnity, gold-threaded robes, perfumed halls, traditional rites performed in both Greek and Persian fashion. Everyone bows, the wine flows, the musicians play, like their jobs depend on it. They might. Your generals grumble, some loudly, others only to their tent walls. They're warriors. They didn't sign up to be part of a geopolitical romance novel, but you make them marry anyway. Some resist. You smile. They obey. After the vows, there's feasting. Tables stretch across courtyards, lamb roasted with pomegranate glaze, baskets of dates, honey-sweet pastries. You make speeches about unity, brotherhood, legacy. You toast to the future. No one mentions how awkward the seating chart is. You even provide dowries. Lavishly. You want this to feel real, or at least permanent. Of course, not everyone is thrilled. Your Macedonian troops whisper that you're going native. They don't like the robes, they don't like the customs, and they definitely don't like that their general is forcing his inner circle into arranged marriages with women they've just met over stuffed grape leaves. Still, you insist, because you believe in symbolism, in performance, in creating the kind of empire where a Greek general and a Persian noblewoman can share a table. if not a language. Historians argue whether the Susa weddings were about genuine integration or just another power flex. Some say you wanted to fuse cultures. Others say you wanted leverage over your commanders by tying them to Persian families. You don't answer, you just keep going. You start learning Persian fluently. You promote Persians to higher ranks. You train them in Greek tactics. You train Greeks in Persian court etiquette. You try to make both sides believe they're at the center of something new. Not everyone buys it. Some of your older generalsmen who bled for Macedon start pulling away, politely but firmly. They see a line being crossed. You see a future being drafted. You don't argue, you just nod and keep building. At night, you write letters to distant satraps. You sketch plans for new cities. You imagine schools, temples, forums where children raised in bilingual homes debate Aristotle next to Zoroastrian fire altars. You also visit your new wife, politely, occasionally. Yours isn't a romance for the ages, but she's kind, intelligent, and speaks softly, like someone aware she's married to a living political metaphor. Over time, some of the marriages work. Others dissolve under the weight of cultural whiplash and mutually baffled expectations. But for a moment, at least, the empire feels a little closer together. You keep a record of the wedding guests, a list of names now tangled in your empire's story. Sometimes you reread it and wonder if unity can be choreographed, if trust can be arranged like a seating plan. One evening, a musician plays a melody that blends Greek and Persian modes. You close your eyes. It sounds like possibility. The banquet ends. The dancers tire. The wine runs low. And in the stillness afterward, you wonder if you can make people marry. Can you make them love? If not, can you make them stay? You don't know yet, but tomorrow you ride again. Toward India. Toward something even more ambitious than weddings. Understanding. You stand at the edge of what was once called the known world, but you've turned that label into a challenge. Beyond the lands of Persia lies India place, whispered about for its rivers that refuse to stop, jungles dense enough to swallow, armies and creatures that defy expectation. Elephants, real armored elephants. Your army is tired. Their armors stick to their backs. Their letters home speak of heat that feels personal, and their spirits waver with each mile. But you've never been one to stop when something gets hard. You send ahead scouts. You study maps. You gather intelligence. You plan. Crossing into the Punjab, the humidity hits you like a physical force. The air feels wet enough to swim in. You taste salt on your own sweat. Cloths cling to skin. Mosquitoes buzz in rhythms that feel like prayer bells. It feels alive. Your command takes you through narrow passes, swollen rivers, and towns where the locals are as varied in customs as they are in skin tone. Horses struggle. Food needs change. You adapt. You teach supplies how to dunk in water before drying them on bushes. You schedule marches for dawn and dusk, avoiding peak sun. Then rumors begin of Indian war, elephants, massive beasts, armored and ready for combat. To your Macedonian-trained mind, it's like hearing that giants roam the land. They don't disappoint. Near the river Hydaspes, you face King Persia, formidable warrior riding a towering elephant. You observe tactics. You adjust formations. You empathize with your troops. This is unlike anything they've seen. When battle comes, it's cacophony. Elephants charge, horses shy, spears thrust, men shout. You dive into the fray. You direct from the front. You match strategy to survival. You win, but the cost is steep. Elephants collapse. Horses scream. Soldiers lie in the dirt, panting, caught mid-battle. You come face to face with Parson Elephantback. Instead of finishing him, you stop. You ask him how he wishes to be treated. Historians call it magnanimity. You call it understanding. You can break people, or you can ask them to stand with you. Paras stands. He speaks. He's given a province to rule under you. He remains in power. You gain a reputation, not just a conqueror, a leader of people. Yet the land is exhausting, the terrain relentless, the air sticky, the nights quiet but tense. Your men fall ill. You fight mosquitoes like battles. You sleep in soggy camps. Every breath tastes of endurance. Eventually, they say no more. The voice belongs to Craterus, maybe Nearchus, maybe the entire Macedonian corps. They're beyond finish. They're tired. But you transform retreat into proclamation. You point at the eastern horizon, mouth a gentle nod to the gods, and declare it the divine end of the line. The rivers have spoken. The world, perhaps, is too vast. You retreat, but not quietly. Altars to each major god are built. Feasts held. Songs sung. Back along the Gedrosian desert path, you march with purpose, not despair. You bleed, but silently. You survive. By the time you reach Susa, you're changed. Perhaps a bit smaller inside, but expanded in every other direction. The world has not gotten smaller. It's gotten more vivid, more complex, more alive. And though the thought tugs at you perhaps, there was more east to uncover you. Give the order to return. The men applaud, relieved. You respect that applause, but you won't let it define you. You've seen beyond the edge. You've felt what it truly means to push limits. And though your empire stretches across continents, you now know that some frontiers exist not just in land, but in self. Tomorrow, you'll return toward Babylon, toward more maps, more decisions, more intention. For now, you rest with elephants, jungles, rivers, and the knowledge that even greatness has a far side. You've crossed rivers, mountains, deserts, and the patience of thousands of soldiers. You've faced elephants, monsoons, heat that makes iron hiss, and now the word you never wanted to hear from your army. No, it comes at the banks of the Hyphasis River. The men stand in ranks, arms crossed, sweat dripping, sandals caked in ancient mud. Your general's eyes, weary from years of endless campaign, echo it no more. You pace in front of them like a father whose children have suddenly decided bedtime is optional. You make your speech one of your best. You remind them of Troy, of Achilles, of Persepolis, of all the things they've survived. You speak of glory, of legacy, of a sea they've never seen, of what lies just beyond. They stare at you, unmoved. Somewhere in the back, someone sneezes. No one laughs. They are done. Your body tenses. Your jaw sets. For a moment, you think of commanding them, ordering them forward. You are, after all, their king, their general, their everything. But then you look closer. These aren't the same men who cheered at Gaugamela or feasted in Babylon. These are thinner, quieter, older men, veterans in spirit and scars. They've marched through more worlds than most mortals even imagine, and they are tired. So you turn around, you go back to your tent, and you sulk. Not dramatically, quietly. You don't eat, you don't speak. You lie on a cushion, arm over your eyes, like a misunderstood teenage god. The camp tiptoes around your silence. Officers whisper, guards exchange glances. Eventually, you emerge. You tell them the gods have spoken, that the omens are unclear, that the signs favor a return, that perhaps the world has boundaries, and the wise leader knows when to pause. They nod, relieved. You all pretend it was a divine decision, not a very human surrender. The retreat begins, but being you, it isn't simple. You don't just turn around, you chart a new path, south, along the Indus. You establish new satrapies, you negotiate, build, pacify. You do everything except look like someone retreating. You even send part of your army back by Sunder, your admiral Nirkaspek. If you're going to leave, it should at least be poetic. The return is brutal. You cross the Jedrosian desert, one of the most inhospitable places on earth. Sand that burns, winds that cut, water that vanishes. Men die, hundreds, some say thousands. Horses collapse, camels vanish into the haze. You walk, not ride. You carry water to soldiers. You bury the dead with your own hands. You lead, and still they follow. When you finally stagger into Carmania, months later, you hold a victory parade, a strange one. Your men dress in silks, garlands, bright fabrics they've acquired along the way. It looks more like a festival than a military procession. You smile, because even in retreat, you've expanded something. Not just an empire, but a mindset. You've taught your army to absorb, not just conquer, to learn, to adapt, to leave behind more than graves. Historians argue whether the mutiny was a failure or the wisest moment of your reign, whether your ego cracked or your wisdom sharpened, whether you should have pushed forward, died trying. You don't argue, you move on, because even gods, or those pretending to be, need to know when to rest. And somewhere in the West, Babylon waits, not for more conquest, but for what comes next. You return to Babylon, and it's not the same city you left. Or maybe you're not the same man. The city pulses with a slow, humid rhythm. The Euphrates drifts by like a forgetful old god. The ziggurats glow in the evening sun. The market smells of spices, incense, and the soft sourness of ambition. You walk the halls of your palace in silence. Your steps echo. The walls are lined with treasures from every corner of your empire. Persian scrolls, Egyptian carvings, Indian silks. You touch them all, but they don't touch you back. You're 29, and everything feels both too heavy and too light. The empire you built stretches farther than most maps can handle. From the Ionian Sea to the edge of the Indus, your rule crosses languages, climates, customs. No king before you has tried anything like this. Few have dared to imagine it. Now, you're not leading marches, you're leading paperwork. Governors need instructions. Satraps need replacing. Cities need reorganizing. Roads, currency, laws, borders. You're more administrator than adventurer now. You sign documents until your wrist aches. You meet with scribes, engineers, judges. You pretend to enjoy it. But at night, the fever comes. It begins as a chill in your spine, then heat, then sweat so thick it soaks your robes. You lie on your bed, blankets kicked away, body trembling, thoughts swimming. The doctors whisper. They offer herbal drafts. They burn incense. They call in priests. Nothing works. In the dark, your mind wanders. You think of your mother, Olympias, who once told you the gods had plans for you. You think of Aristotle and his talk of balance. You think of Hephaestion, gone now your closest companion, your other self buried with honors, mourned with silence. You never quite escaped. See ghosts in the firelight, cities you've raised, friends you've lost, roads that lead nowhere. One night, you ask an aide, do you think the world can be ruled with reason? He doesn't answer. He brings more water. You dream of mountains, of deserts, of the ocean you never reached. Your generals gather in your chambers. They stand at the edges of your vision. Their voices blur. They argue about succession, about who should lead, about what you meant when you said you wanted a world united. You try to speak. Your throat cracks. Someone leans close. You whisper to the strongest. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe that's just what they wrote down later. Historians argue about your death. Was it malaria, typhoid, poison, a broken heart over Hephaestion, a body that simply couldn't carry greatness any longer? They debate it like it matters, like the cause can explain the legacy. Meanwhile, your empire fractures. Your generals, the Diadochi, divide your lands like pie. At a feast, wars erupt. Cities shift. Your grand plan empire of unity, culture, and shared power becomes footnotes in the chronicles of ambitious men with fewer metaphors. And yet, your name survives. On coins, on statues, on cities. So many cities named Alexandria. Some thrive, some vanish into sand. But the name remains. Children learn it. Poets invoke it. Kings compare themselves to it. You become a story told to inspire, to warn, to dazzle. You die young. That part is certain. Your breath slows in Babylon, surrounded not by enemies or gods, but by friends too afraid to imagine a world without you. Your hand falls still. Your crown, too heavy now, rests beside your bed. Outside, the river keeps flowing. You leave behind no heir, well, not a clear one. There's a son, technically, but he's an infant. There's also a half-brother, mentally unfit for leadership by most accounts. What you leave behind, most clearly, is a vacuum huge, echoing, irresistible. And your generals, oh, your generals, they've followed you through deserts and avalanches, across rivers and into nightmares. But now, with no orders left, no master to rally behind, they do what powerful men do when the grown-up leaves the room. They argue, first, about your body, because, apparently, even in death, you're high maintenance. Some say it should be returned to Macedon, to your ancestral tombs. Others suggest burying you in Babylon after all. It was your chosen capital. Still others think you should be enshrined like a demigod, somewhere visible, somewhere symbolic. Your body ends up traveling. Ptolemy, one of your closest and canniest companions, hijacks the funeral procession and reroutes it to Egypt. He buries you in Alexandria, so the story goes. The location of your final resting place becomes one of history's more glamorous mysteries. Scholars still argue about it. Some whisper that your tomb is hidden beneath the streets. Others claim it was destroyed. Others suspect your remains were quietly replaced with someone less imperial. Then comes the real chaos. The Diadochi, your surviving generals and satraps, meet and pretend to like each other for about 8 minutes. Then the swords come out metaphorically at first. Perdiccas tries to hold the empire together. He fails. Ptolemy secures Egypt and smiles politely as if he didn't just steal a corpse. Seleucus takes the east. Antigonus grabs Asia Minor. Lysimachus carves out Thrace. Cassander clutches Macedon and Greece. Your dream one unified world into pieces, named after the men who once marched behind you. They marry, betray, scheme, and occasionally throw banquets where poison is always an option. They declare themselves kings, pharaohs, strategoi. They mint coins with their own faces, some with yours, posthumously sainted. The empire lasts less than a decade in its unified form. The wars that follow, called appropriately the wars of the successors, drag on for decades. Sometimes over land, sometimes over honor, often over egos the size of provinces. No one rules the full expanse again. Historians debate whether this was inevitable. Could you have set up a system, named a regent, drafted a will that didn't feel like a riddle? Maybe. But you always lived like time was your ally, that the momentum would never stall. You weren't thinking about endings. You were thinking about cities that hadn't yet been built. And yet, ironically, your legacy expands in the confusion. Your image appears everywhere. On coins, walls, amphorae. You become a cultural export. In Egypt, you're declared a god. In Persia, a wise ruler. In India, something between a conqueror and a mystery. Even in the mess your death leaves, people continue saying your name with the reverence usually reserved for stars or storms. Alexandria flourishes. So do the sciences, philosophy, art. You didn't just spread your rule. You spread curiosity. Libraries are built. Debates had borders drawn and redrawn based on whose version of you they believed in. Some say your empire failed because it lacked a solid foundation. Others say its very idea, integration, exploration, shared culture, survived far beyond its borders. Your generals continue to squabble for decades. Some die in battle. None of them ever build an empire like yours again. And yet, their legacies become footnotes in yours. Because while they were fighting over what you left behind, the world started remembering what you tried to build. You, Alexander, left behind not just territories. You left behind a question. What if the world could belong to more than one culture at a time? No one has quite answered it yet. Your body may have stilled in Babylon, but your story only gets louder. It spreads through whispers at market stalls, in scrolls copied by candlelight, in legends told by sailors who claim to have seen your statue cry beneath the stars. You, Alexander of Macedon, have become something between a man and a metaphor. Let's start with the coins. Soon after your death, cities across your former empire begin minting your face. You stare out in profile, hair tousled by an invisible wind, features polished into a blend of mortal perfection and divine suggestion. Some coins show you wearing the ram's horns of Amun Egyptian godhood, now a standard part of your branding package. These coins don't just pay for goods, they pay for memory. They circulate through lands you never stepped foot in, carrying with them the myth of a man who tried to stretch the world into one long conversation. Then there are the cities. Alexandria by the sea is the crown jewel, but there are dozens more. Alexandria in Arachosia. Alexandria, Eshe literally, the furthest. Some survive as modern towns, others vanish into dust and nostalgia. Each was meant to be a node in your imagined network, places where East and West could share olives, astronomy, and awkward diplomacy. You named them for yourself, not out of arrogance, though. Let's not lie, that was part of it, but as markers of intention. These cities were your version of temples, not to gods, but to the future. And then, of course, come the myths. In Greek tales, you become a demigod. In Persian ones, a noble ruler who brought justice. In Islamic literature, you evolve into Del Karnani, the two-horned one, a figure of wisdom and strength. In India, stories blur you with local heroes and legends. You become a shapeshifter of history, appearing in whatever form the culture needs. There are stories of you diving to the ocean floor in a glass barrel, of you flying into the sky on a griffin-powered chariot, of you building gates to keep out Gog and Magog. Some of these are charming, others slightly terrifying. All of them say one thing: you were too large for a single narrative. And scholars, they never stop. Some argue you were a visionary trying to create a multicultural empire. Others say you were just really good at war and really bad at follow-through. Some think you were a genius. Others think you were a cautionary tale with nice abs. They write papers, they hold conferences, they debate whether your campaigns were inspired by Homeric heroism or just unresolved dad issues. You're not here to comment, but the fact that they're still arguing suggests you did something more lasting than build an empire. You built a conversation, a living tension between conquest and cooperation, myth and memory, and you linger in strange places, in street names, in video games, in dreams of lost cities buried under the sea. Your image has traveled farther than your armies. Your story mutated into new languages, of history always there, always slightly golden. And maybe that's your real legacy. Not just the cities or the coinage, not even the political chaos left in your wake, but the idea that someone once tried to hold the entire known world in their hands and ask it to recognize itself as one. You didn't succeed, but you made the attempt sound noble. And now, whenever someone picks up a map, whenever a student hears your name for the first time, they pause, just long enough to wonder what you saw out there past the rivers, past the smoke, past the last city that bore your name. And that's enough. Asterisk, asterisk. So now, with the story softly folded and the pages settled like dust on ancient stone, it's time to rest. You've traveled far tonight, through deserts and dreams, across rivers and regrets. Under starlit skies, stood in silent throne rooms, and whispered to oracles who smelled faintly of sandalwood and mystery. The world of Alexander was loud, ambitious, breathless, but you can breathe now. Let the cities fade into twilight. Let the coins stop spinning. Let the scrolls close gently, without fuss. The maps will wait. The myths can hum quietly in the background, like a far-off lullaby carried on the wind. You are safe. There are no more battles, no more plans, just the sound of your own breath, steady and slow. The soft rhythm of the past, like waves lapping at the shore of memory. In your mind, picture a quiet hill overlooking the Euphrates, the sky dimming from gold to velvet, the cicadas singing their ancient, lazy song, and somewhere nearby, the rustle of a royal tent you no longer need to enter. You are not a king now. You are simply a traveler returned. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your jaw unclench. Let your thoughts soften like worn fabric. And as you drift further into sleep, know this: you've seen the great, impossible arc of a life that tried to touch the world and left it dreaming. Rest now, friend of empires. The stars are out, and they are quiet. End of script.